This is like one of the arguments that people have been making in international trade is like, Trump came out and said, anyone retaliates, I'm going to go crazy. And or like, I'm really going to double retaliate against them. He did. But now China tariffs into the United States from China are actually lower than they were on Liberation Day. So it's kind of this irony of like, do the Chinese, did they play their cards correctly or not? And who knows?
But how does that translate to domestic freight volume and freight?
Well, the stuff's all got to come in, right?
Yeah.
And so you think about the fact that if you go back to COVID where we had the bottleneck, we don't have bottlenecks right now.
Right.
But a couple of things have been happening. One is the container vessel companies have been cutting capacity. So the ships that would normally be in a normal transit flow have been cut. And so it takes a little bit of time. The container boxes that haven't been coming over so you have all this sort of restarting has created its own challenges.
Right.
But we weren't shut down long enough to have this problem. That seems to me to be a much smaller problem to deal with than the bigger issue, which is the surge of orders. What's going to happen is freight's going to flow in. Companies are taking possession of that inventory, and a large percent of that inventory is probably, some of this will be replenishment of inventories that were going to be stocked out. Yep. But a good portion of it, and perhaps the majority of it, will be freight that's actually not needed for months or quarters ahead. So you could see a lot of holiday goods. Companies may have been shipping in September and not even early October before Golden Week. They're going to push those orders into June. And so we're going to see an enormous amount of freight flow into warehouses and distribution centers, which is, if you go back to our trade dashboard, Zach, real quick, because I think this is really important, pull up this right here on warehouse prices and warehouse capacity. Warehouse prices are already reflecting conditions that, I mean, look at 11% month over month change. I think when we go look at this data in the next month, when the next release is out, I expect that to have increased.
Right.
And I expect warehouse capacity to, by the way, it's declining, right?
It actually, so warehouse capacity expanded, which means they're getting more warehousing room.
Yeah, but that should we see a decrease
I think
in that?
In the next month, we actually should see that deteriorate potentially. It just depends on the timing.
The number would deteriorate because capacity starts to shrink.
Yeah, it should shrink a little bit potentially because we had the last glut. Now, I say that's really talking about April because the pull forward ended in April.
But companies know, if you run a warehouse operation, you know, that's why warehouse prices are reflecting this.
Yeah.
But I also think capacity will probably decrease as freight comes in.